critical thousand days, and ensuring that we deliver on Dame Andrea's vision of giving every baby the best possible start in life. And I very much share, as you know, as I know you do as a former children and families minister yourself, the passion and vision to improve the lives of babies and all children, including, of course, those important years, young children and their families, and recognise the importance of supporting good mental health and well-being as a hugely integral part of this. And that's why together with the Department for Health and Social Care, we're investing, I think, just over £300 million. So I think 302 to be precise, £1 million in family hubs and the crucial Start for Life period. And as you've kindly invited me to do so, I'll share with you my vision for family hubs and update you on where we're at with the delivery of our commitments made so far. And as I sort of touched on, Dame Andrea has been absolutely hugely instrumental in developing the vision and highlighting the importance of giving babies the best start in life. She rightly continues to push us to go further and faster. And then, of course, we've got the independent review of children's social care, which sets out the need for a real, for want of a better phrase, revolution in family or early help. And both of these will very much guide our response to improve the support that we put in place for families. And my personal belief is that family hubs can very much not just support us in transforming this, but actually be at the very heart of that. And the Start for Life offer is very much at the core of family hubs. However, family hubs extend beyond this to support families with children of all ages. So that's one of the sort of big differentiating features between family hubs and the predecessor, if you like, in Sure Start. So up to young people of 19 to 25 for special educational needs and disabilities. And it enables local authorities to better respond to the needs of the whole family. So, you know, fundamentally, what are they about? It's about improving access to services. It's about improving the connections, those all important connections between families, professionals and services, including, of course, very importantly, at a local level, voluntary, community and faith sector partners, and to put relationships, if you like, at the heart of family support. The plan is that a family hub is a welcoming place where services can be accessed by parents-to-be, parents, carers, families, young people, all in one place, almost as a one-stop shop, making it easier for families to know how and where to get the help and support that they need in a timely fashion. And families will be able to find out about open access services and be connected to targeted and specialist services where they need it. And this could be in a building that's already a familiar place within a community, such as a children's centre, a library or a youth centre or a school. Or it could, importantly, again, a big differentiating factor, could also be accessed online. And we've seen over the course of the pandemic how important that is, that people are able to access that support where they need it, if necessary, from home or another place. So it's because of these opportunities that family hubs can bring to better support families that we are absolutely committed to rolling them out. And as I said, in the autumn budget, the Chancellor announced £302 million to transform services for parents. So what does that include? So on the 2nd of April, we announced the 75 local authorities eligible to receive the funding. So that funding enables them to create a network of family hubs within their local authority area. That all-important support for breastfeeding and for local authorities to publish their Start for Life offer, funding for parenting programs delivered via DFE. And importantly, it includes £100 million to roll out bespoke parent-infant mental health support, which I know is something that Dame Andrea has been so passionate about. And this funding builds on the pre-existing £39.5 million that the government already committed for family hubs. And with this, we're building that evidence base through evaluation and through the National Centre for Family Hubs that are providing that expert advice and guidance. And we're developing, as I mentioned, the digital side, we're developing a number of data and digital products which will help support the practical implementation of family hubs. And we've got 12, at least in fact 12 local authorities, which are in effect are trailblazers, And they're there to transform services and open family hubs through a family hubs transformation fund. And we've announced the first wave of those successful local authorities. And I think at the heart of this, all of this will help develop and harness family hubs best practice, because we've got that core offer of what we want to see in every family hub. But I want local authorities to be really ambitious about what a family hub network across the local authority area could develop, and how they can improve how families can access that support that meets their needs in their local area. And I think that will help us to build on the great work that so many of you within the APPG and the wider sector already do. And it'll help us to provide thousands of families up and down our country with support when they need it, and importantly, ensuring that babies get that best start for life. So I've probably gone on for too long, Tim, already, but I would say working in partnership, and that's absolutely key. I'm convinced that we can better support families via local authorities to health services and the charity sector. And I'm really looking forward to working with you, the sector and local authorities to deliver on this vision. And if I may just end with this, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you for everything that you do supporting babies, children and families, and for helping speak up and give babies and children a voice to rightly ensure that their needs are met. And I know, and I'm really excited about this piece of work. Together, we can give every baby in our country the best possible start in life. Tim, thank you very much. Thanks again for having me.
Well, that's really kind. Can I just ask you one quick question for you, a practical question? So we know we have the announcement about half of the authorities, based on deprivation criteria, are getting the first wave. Now, I took Andrea to see one of the children's centres in my constituency, Wellbeing, which is not in the first wave, but has already rebadged to a family hub, and the local authority is taking the initiative of moving across. How are you going to monitor how well other authorities who are in that first wave are getting on with the programme, but also the second wave, who are going to have to wait a while longer to get the funding, are actually getting with the programme and making that transition across to family hubs, even if they don't have the full funding up front to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a really fair question, and you're right that we've got the funding for the first 75 plus the 12 trailblazers, but actually there are already local authorities up and down the country. Yours is one, Essex is another, where they're actually quite advanced already in terms of rolling out a family hub network. Now, it might not be exactly in the model that we hope to see as part of the 75 and the trailblazers, but through the National Centre and through the department, we will be working with local authorities. I think that additional £1 million that's going to the 75, just over £1 million that's going to the 75 local authorities to in effect give them the capacity to start to do that work is going to make a difference. But there is nothing stopping local authorities already from moving towards a family hub model. And I think you'll probably know me well enough to know that, yes, we've secured that money as part of this SR period. But I think the piece of work we have to do now is making sure that we're gathering that evidence and analysis of the 12 trailblazers and the 75 as we roll out, to ensure that we're in a really good place ahead of the next SR to be able to make a case to the Chancellor to bid for additional funding to make sure that every local authority in England is setting up a family hub network. So we're going to keep a really close watchful eye. We've got the National Centre, but also from a departmental perspective, we'll work with any local authority that wants to set up, and I hope they all want to, a family hub network across their area.
Thanks for that. Well, I know you've got to go. Good luck in Sweden. I think it was about 15 years ago, I took the Shadow Children and Families team. We went to Sweden, Finland and Denmark to learn what they were doing around childcare and early years there, and they've still got a bit to teach us. So perhaps when you come back in the autumn, we can have you back for a more lengthy session with the.
I would love that. Thank you, and I'm always very, very happy to come along.
Thanks so much. Okay,
pleasure. Lovely to see you.
All right. Bye bye. Right. Welcome.
This week, I was going to kick off with an introduction to infant mental health and what it is, why it matters, which I know is familiar to lots of people. But also just where we are at in terms of current policies. And I thought we often talk about this period of opportunity and vulnerability, and I think that's true. It's obviously true of babies, and I'll talk about that. It's also true, I think, of the policy landscape at the moment as well. So infant mental health describes the social and emotional well-being and development of children in the earliest years of life. And like all of us, babies' mental health is influenced by their genes and their physiology, but also by their environment. But I think the most important thing for babies, if you think about them being very underdeveloped, very dependent on the parent, is that environment is the relationships they have. And relationships are so key to infant mental health. And when we're talking about infant mental health, we're really talking about the quality of those parent-infant relationships. So, you know, this quote, for the baby, the mother, or the father, the caregiver, essentially is that environment that is shaping their development. And again, this quote from the Harvard Center for Developing Child: children experience their world as an environment of relationships which are affecting virtually all aspects of the development. So today we're talking about infant mental health and social and emotional development. If you're thinking about children's language development, their cognitive development, or even how they're kind of eating, or you know, their relationship with the food they're consuming, all of that is mediated by those relationships and the people who are looking after them. And we know that what happens in this period is particularly important because the first 1,000 days is such a critical period in early development. And this is a time when the brain is developing more quickly than any other period, and that development is shaped by what's going on, by the environment around the child. And so we have this period of both opportunity to get things right, to lay firm foundations, but also vulnerability, because although it's never too late to support a child and to try and get things right, it's harder to make change later if we don't get things right in the earliest years. We now know more about kind of how the brain development, and actually baby's brain development is was evolutionarily quite a clever thing, that it adapts to this environment. So if you think about this little cave baby and the mother living in a world where you've got the saber-toothed tiger and the woolly mammoth, and you need to be on constant alert, for that baby to adapt to that environment and to learn from the mum's high levels of stress and that sort of fetal program in the womb, to be born with a heightened fight or flight response, that was adapted. It was useful in the past, but it's no longer helpful. You know, those kids who've got a high fight or flight response because they've been exposed to early stress will struggle in the classroom or in the playground to thrive in life. And that's kind of why we now need to think about what that environment looks like, so that children are best able for the modern world. Babies do learn very quickly and do start to adapt to the world around them. I don't know how well this picture comes out for those people watching on the screen, but this is a screenshot of a mum and baby who are having therapy. You can see this tiny baby whose mum experienced domestic violence. There were lots of problems. It's already learning to avoid mum's gaze, to look away. It's that even that tiny baby has learned that relationship is difficult. You can see that kind of vigilance, and that is already setting a difficult trajectory for that baby. So we know that early relationships matter, and they matter for so many aspects of development, and if they go wrong, similarly, it can have pervasive impacts. So there's lots and lots of evidence. I've just pulled out a few things on this slide, particularly about the link, because we talk about mental health today, about the link between what happens in early relationships in the first 1,000 days and teenage mental health, because we talk, as these headlines that I just grabbed very easily yesterday, talk about this teenage mental health crisis, and we're ignoring what's going on. Well, actually, one of the key things that's influencing teenage mental health is what happens to children in the first 1,000 days. So just 3 papers that I've quoted here. 2/3 of the variability in adolescent mental health is explained by risk factors before age 3. Children who were parented sensitively during early childhood cost 13 times less by the age of 12 than those who weren't. And if a mother is in the top 15% of the population during pregnancy with worse anxiety and stress, doubles the risk of teenage mental health problems. So we're thinking a lot in mental health services about this teenage mental health crisis and kind of urgent and acute care for teenagers, and obviously we need to do that, but actually we also need to turn on the tap to stem this by getting things right for babies' mental health. And we did some new research which was published yesterday. We did a poll of 2,000 members of the UK public, representative sample, and also professionals, teachers and early years workers. And it suggested that they really do know some of this evidence about the importance of early relationships. So 97% of professionals and 75% of the public said that early relationships are very important, and most of the rest said that they're important. People do recognise that this matters. And the positive thing is that we know that therapy and the right services, good health visiting, good work in children's centres and family hubs, but most important for these most vulnerable families, specialist support, mental health support, can really make a difference. So this is the same mum and baby that I showed earlier, and you can see that lovely attuned relationship after parent-infant therapy. You can see that difference, and that child's not just the love of interacting with his mum's changed, but his whole trajectory and life chances have changed through that early therapeutic support. So there's a whole range of services that can support early relationships, so we need to get all of those right. But we know that for families where it's there are the most kind of intergenerational trauma and more complex difficulties, that we do need specialist professionals with mental health training, but very specifically training and working with pre-verbal babies and their parents and those early relationships to get this right. And that's where specialised parent relationship teams play a role. So there are currently 42 of these teams across the UK. Alison will be pleased to know that they are rapidly expanding in Scotland at the moment, which is wonderful. And we have seen more commitments across the UK, but there's obviously still a long way to go. Now, these teams, they adapt according to local needs and to where they've grown in the system. They'll have different names on the ground, but they have some core things that are common. The most important one is that they're multidisciplinary teams, but they're led by those highly skilled mental health professionals. So a psychologist or a psychotherapist, and Lisa will talk about her later, that shows kind of what that means in practice. And they play two roles in a system. So they're experts and champions across the system, providing training, consultation, supervision to help visitors, social workers, GPs and others, so that all services are working better, either at protecting and promoting infant mental health themselves, where they can do that. Many families just do need that universal support, but also in identifying those risk factors and making early referrals. In the research that we published yesterday, some lovely case studies of both the direct work that parent teams can do with families, but also some of that indirect work. So there's a lovely example from Leeds of a foster mum and a social worker who were supervised. They just had a few phone calls with the infant mental health team to help them really think about what a little baby needed and how he could recover from the trauma that he'd suffered. So these are the teams that we would like to see existing across the whole country if we're really going to get things right in terms of infant mental health supervision. And the research yesterday suggests that people do recognise that this is what this support is needed. So 84% of the public in that poll agreed strongly that health services should offer support to families with issues in early parent relationships. And I think that matters because this does feel different to what mental health services would traditionally do. And I think sometimes there's a concern that this feels kind of like it's really getting involved very much in family life right at the start. But I think, you know, there is that recognition that this is how we make a difference to children's lives. At the moment, we're far from having those services. So I said there's only 42 parent-infant teams across the UK. And we also know from research that we've done this year and in previous years around gaps just in mental health services generally for 0 to 5s. So 42% of CCGs in England, the mental health services wouldn't accept a referral for a child aged 2 and under. So that's not just, and that's just accepting the referral. Actually, when we dug into that research, a lot of them, even if they accept referral, did not have the skills to actually work with that family. And similar finding from research last year, so only 36% of NHS cancer professionals said that in their area there were services that could work with babies 0 to 2. And the Health and Select Committee report late last year kind of reported on this as a kind of a bit of a blind spot in terms of the NHS in England's long-term plan and how services are reported. There's this fantastic vision of a comprehensive 0 to 25 mental health service, but actually the 0 to 5 bit of that is very much lagging behind the rest of the system. There is lots being done. It's a time, just like that baby's brain, kind of opportunity vulnerability. It's the same in policy, I think, at the moment. So we have got commitments in lots of different bits of policy around government, around improvements in universal and specialist services for babies and their families. So there's a few of them listed on that slide: the NHS long-term plan, Start for Life money that Will talked about earlier, and changes in other parts of policy as well. So lots of opportunity that we could really get the change that babies need. But a lot of these commitments aren't yet very specific about what they really will deliver for women's mental health. And so that turning of rhetoric and ambition into reality is really important. And it's important that there's the national work done to do that and to invest in things like the workforce required to make this happen, the local effort required across all of the local authorities around the country and health boards and integrated care boards and all of the others who can make a difference. And that accountability so that no babies are left behind. All of this different work across government is brilliant, but it's very fragmented, and there's a risk of kind of lots of bits of the system trying to do things with perhaps duplication and perhaps gaps and bits of the system missing out. So it's really important to join these things up and to try and work out how do we get all of this effort and energy and resource that is going into the system to work effectively to create sustained change, not just something for the next 2 years, more money in this spending review, but actually really changing the system in the long term and really making sure that we get the special services. So kind of light touch, universal work and family hubs and drop-in groups is wonderful, but it's not going to make a difference for the babies like we saw in that early slide where they've got really early trauma. We need the specialist workforce and we need resources to do this. It cannot be done on a shoestring. It will reap rewards in the long term, but it needs that investment now. And the Start for Life investment is wonderful, but it's only for 75 local authorities and it's only at the moment for this spending review. We need that investment across all areas of the country in the long term. So there is lots of exciting stuff happening, but it's up to the members of this group, MPs, Lords, and all of us working with local areas as well to really make sure that that translates.
Sally, are these slides, and particularly some of the reports, referred to got those stats earlier about the financial impact and things as well?
Yeah.
Are they going to be available on the website?
Yeah.
But with the underlying reports referenced there as well. So
Yeah, they are all available online at the moment, but I will put it all together so it's easy to access.
Right, there's a couple of comments to see on the chat Q&A. I don't think that's you. What we're going to do is Andrea's due to join us shortly. We're going to go to Andrea, and then we have got additional speakers. I'm delighted that Liz and Mary still have joined us here, and then with Sally, we're going to take questions at the end. Right, now I can't see
So
that.
I can read that. It's a commitment from government to increase health visitor numbers and to deliver the Better Start vision. I think that's probably one best to wait for Andrea to get here.
Yeah.
I'll see what's in the chat. Difficult to hear.
Oh,
No.
right, could you just do it all again?
I was terrified with all this and we did record it on this laptop, so I'm very sorry if others found it difficult to hear.
So it will be broadcast anyway because it's been recorded. So
Yeah.
it goes on YouTube.
Yeah.
For people to catch up with a high volume. Right.
Get down. Is that what we talk to? The microphone's over there. Okay.
It's below the TV. It was perfectly right with Will Quincy. You could hear us and we could hear it fine. So it may just be one person. Okay.
We're expecting Andrea in the room any minute.
Yeah, fair, we'll go.
Apologies, I've got to go
Thanks,
for another meeting. It was really good to see the presentation there. I suppose with my own kind of other APPG hat on, what kind of investment do you think is required in terms of interpreting support? Because you mentioned that in the presentation. Because it feels like an overlooked part of this when you look at health visitors, all the other kind of pressures within the system that needs support.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously investment as part of Start for Life, but I think it's very much the same story that if we look at public health grant, which funds those core services, that has dropped hugely over the last 7 years, and particularly in real terms because of inflation and all of the things that grant has to cover at local level. I think it's really stretched. So we're going to really sort of bake in the postcode lottery by this funding, which is only going to go to 25 local areas. And as always, the enlightened local authorities who commit to this agenda prioritise it, perhaps over other things that the other agencies would worry about, but we see through the investment, whereas in other areas it's supposed to reduce suffer. I think that the local variability story is going to be the really key one to watch, and so making sure that national government not just collects statistics about what's happening in the local area, but really interrogates and acts on those. So we're seeing with the health statistics, it's actually very good data on what health is doing, but no action from the Office of Health Improvement to back that up, to hold people to account, to say, hang on, well, you just reported to us at X and to get a check, what's going on there? And I think if you compare that to something like children's social care, where the Department for Education would rightly get very involved if local authorities are reporting problems, I think it's that same mindset that needs to be across these services to really hold local areas to account.
It's quite interesting looking at it from a Scottish perspective. It seems so kind of patchy but across the board in terms of organisation, in terms of data, in terms of how those things are accounted. I mean, even though we have different health and social care partnerships in Scotland, it seems a bit more joined up.
Yeah, and we're going to sustain national commitment, I think, in Scotland. And it takes a long time for local delivery to recover after things have been cut, to build those relationships, to build the services back up. I think even in local areas in England where there is investment now, it's going to take time to come back.
We did try to sort of protect health visiting during the pandemic as well, whereas people were shifted away and didn't come back in parts of England.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that. The health visiting statistics that just came out for England still allows people to count phone and web contacts as contacts. That we've heard it's going to change for the next sort of data point. I think that would be really revealing to show to what extent these services bounce back pandemic or not.
Great, Alison, thank you very much. I'm going to just hold on in minutes. Bear with us, everybody. We're just having some continuity problems here.
Got a question here. Given the long-standing crisis in accessing mental health services for adolescents and adults, how is it a good idea to scoop the underserved into the service? And given the problems many parents find in accessing health support for their babies, isn't turning the focus to infant mental health diversion? Interesting question. I mean, I think we have to be really careful that this isn't an either or, but it's a both and.
Right on, people. Right, should we want to leave that question hanging?
Yeah.
We're going to give you some questions that have come already. Right, now we've got, this is mostly by webinar, so hence the technology so far has held. So we are now joined everybody by Andrew Linton, who needs no introduction. So we've got Andrew for a little while just to give us an update on Best Start in Life, on continued steering of that project. We've had Will Quince on, who's then gone to Sweden, and then we've got Lisa and Mariella going to speak after you. So you are billed, I'll tell you exactly what we're expecting to speak about, as an update on the Start to Life programme, followed by Q&A. So basically, you talk about what you like, that's what you want. So over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks. Well, I'm sorry to have missed Will, actually, because I'm hoping I'm not just going to say exactly what Will said. But the first thing to point out to everybody is that I chair the Start for Life work as a backbencher. And the three sponsoring ministers are Will Quince in education, Maria Caulfield in health, and in fact Michael Ellis, who is Paymaster General, because he has the sort of responsibility of banging heads together across Whitehall to make sure that people are actually joined up and working together on this. And all three ministers are absolutely committed, which is brilliant news. So by way of a quick update, as you will all know, under the Start for Life vision, we have 6 key action areas. The first 3 are a joined up set of Start for Life services for every new family. So every new baby, whether they're cared for by their parents or their carers. So joined up services is absolutely critical. That's the one thing that everybody said is, you know, I discovered I was pregnant and then what now? Where do I go? What do I need? And not having any signposting. So join up is vital. The second is the family hub concept, which I'm sure Will spoke about at some length, which is both a physical space where you can go to get help, to have a cup of coffee, to speak to a health visitor, a mental health professional, and so on. So a physical space, absolutely crucial that it's also a virtual space, so that you can get your kind of Zoom meeting with your health visitor, you can call and get specific questions answered and so on, but also so that you can get support online for breastfeeding or help with perhaps your partner who might be struggling a bit or whatever. So virtual support is critical. And then the third thing is the outreach, which of course health visitors and midwives already come to your home. But what we want to see is many more support services for the perinatal period delivered at home. So then the third key action area is a digital version of the Red Book. That's made huge progress in the last few weeks. I was actually quite doom and gloom about the digital version of the Red Book, but now NHSX, or NHS Digital as it's just changed its name to, now has a new leader who is determined to use the electronic patient record that is already partially rolled out in England, and to create, using that as the template, a set of fields that then can become a digital version of the Red Book. And in fact, we're looking at the spec for that as we speak. And so I can't give you a very accurate update, except to say that there will be digital Red Books rolled out in some parts of England next April, absolutely as planned. So that's very exciting, and perhaps for the next update is a bit more detail on exactly what that will look like. Then the other three action areas are all about support for and amplification of and new roles into the early years workforce. That's action area number 4. Number 5 is about outcomes measures. How do we make sure that what we're doing in the early years is actually having the positive outcome for babies and their families that we want to see? And that's as much about continuous improvement of services as it is about making sure that the Treasury will keep funding them. And then the final action area, number 6, is about leadership. So both the provision of local leadership, a single accountable leader in a local area, and about national leadership. So my chairmanship of the project continues until the end of October. It's just been extended. And at that point, the Prime Minister will appoint a member of the Cabinet who will have the oversight responsibility for the Start for Life. So in all of those areas, there's been massive progress over the last year. The 75 areas in England that are going to get funding have been told who they are. They've been told that they are eligible for funding. So 75 upper tier local authority areas. That's 1 in 2 of all upper tier local authority areas in England. So those are the lucky ones who will get funding under the spending review next 3 years for transformation to family hubs, for setting out their joined up Start for Life offer, for establishing parent and carer panels to receive feedback from parents and carers on how that Start for Life was for them. They'll get funding for parent-infant mental health services, so to establish parent-infant support teams. They'll get funding to amplify their breastfeeding, infant feeding support teams, and they will get support, financial support for parenting programs. So for the 75 who are now in an iterative process with the Start for Life unit on, do they want to take this funding? Are they prepared to sign up to the obligations that that will create on them? We expect that the vast majority will want to. There may be a few who don't, and if they don't want to, we will then look at the next on the list of our indices for how we assessed the eligible 75. And so we will end up with 75 local authority areas. This October will be the baseline, at which point every local authority area must commit to providing the Start for Life unit with data on live births, on breastfeeding rates, on potentially the mood of parents. We're still looking at exactly what that baseline data gathering will look like. And then there'll be a small group of those local authority areas, potentially up to 18 of them, who will become trailblazers, i.e. those local authority areas who could really hit the ground running, who are prepared to provide advice and support for other local authority areas, and who can really lead the way. In addition to that, there'll be another group where there'll be some overlap, but not a complete overlap, who will become super evaluators. And the reason it's not a complete overlap is because the super evaluators are likely to be those who are very keen, but who haven't done much in the Start for Life space as yet. And obviously the reason for that is because we want to see a huge impact in a very short space of time. So we want to see breastfeeding rates going from 5% initiation to perhaps 40% over that next 18-month period. We want to see parenting mental health support going from 0 to a really good comprehensive support for parents with their relationship with their babies. We want to see lots of take-up of parenting programs where previously there were none. So the super evaluators will take a very important part in providing evidence to the Treasury of the actual impact of this first wave of funding for this first 3 years. And my ambition, all of our ambition, is of course that in mid-24, which is when the next spending review really kicks off for the period early 25 to 28, that then the Treasury will say, yes, case is proven, we will fund the other 75 and we will provide ongoing funding for the first 75. That's really the sort of the job, not done, but that's when it's really nailed down and we think it will have a really strong trajectory into the future. So that's what we're working towards. And I think that that brings you bang up to date. Thank you, Tim.
Very good. Gosh, there's an awful lot there. Do you want to take those questions which are hanging around there? Whilst we're just getting those up, the point I raised with Will Quint was about the non-75
Yes.
this stage. You and I would see a children's centre in Wellbeing. Wellbeing is part of West Sussex, which is not part of the first aid, but they've already started rebadging and adapting to the family model. So I think there needs to be a strong message that just because you're on first aid doesn't mean that everything is on hold for the next however many years. There are ways that you can move forward, and then the money will be forthcoming. But if it all works well as we're hoping it is. So how do we get them to engage just as actively as those who have been given the money up front?
Yes, so Tim is absolutely right in that. It's critical. I mean, when we launched the vision, which was March 2021, we were not expecting any money. It was a vision that had no funding attached to it at all. And so we were going to go around the country and persuade all local authorities to actually change the way they're doing things. And actually between March and October, when we were suddenly blessed with this 300 million quid, we did find, exactly as you say, Tim, West Sussex, also lots of different local authorities that I've spoken to who are not going to make the cut, including my own county of West Northants, who've already started to change the way that they do things. They've actually started to develop the family hub model. And of course, what the funding does is, in a way, deliver the icing on the cake to be able to amplify services that in many places already exist. And when Tim and I went to Worthing, we found that already the early years professionals were co-located. They were actually planning to redecorate their family hub to make it more family friendly rather than just, you know, pink and blue baby friendly. So they were actually really thinking about even design, and they were certainly looking at the model of physical, virtual and outreach. There will be a lot that the Start for Life unit can provide to all local authorities. So for example, some of the funding for the workforce will be retained centrally so that the whole early years workforce can receive, for example, online learning about such areas as trauma-informed care, the importance of particular sensitivities to ethnic differences between different parents who may have particular health needs and so on. And likewise, parenting programs, very much offered online and digitally, will of course be available to all local authority areas. So there's a lot of support that can actually go nationwide. When I say nationwide, I mean across England, rather than waiting for the next funding submission.
Great. Sally, as my eyesight is not that good, I'm going to read that from the screen.
So the first question, Andrea, is from David, and he says, is there a commitment from government to increase health visitor numbers to help deliver the Start for Life vision? Health visitor experts in helping facilitate relationships between parents and their babies.
So that is a great question. It's all around action area number 4 about the workforce. And the fact of the matter is that there are challenges with health visitors. with recruitment and retention and with training. It takes a long time to train health visitors. I completely agree with you, David. They do the most fantastic job. They are absolutely central to the relationship between parents, carers, families and early years services. However, what we are looking at is different routes into the workforce, because for many health visitors, they find that they are overburdened and that their workload has expanded and expanded, and they don't necessarily have to do every single aspect of it. So what we have funding for as part of the spending review bid is to look at modelling mixed skill workforces. And what that would mean is apprenticeship routes which already exist into nursing, which can support health visiting, into mental health, into early years practitioners. So on the one hand, providing a route into upskilling for people who perhaps work in a nursery and want to look at career progression, but also as a means to amplify, to share the burden, but also absolutely critically, and this was where we started from, was to provide a key contact for every family. Because where we are now, health visitors try very, very hard, but for some, the caseload is so high that really their contact time with each family is very, very limited. And therefore, having a bigger early years workforce working as a team supervised by a health visitor will actually provide much more capacity in the early years space.
Do you want to take that? It's about the 18.
Yeah, well, the 18 areas, that's the trailblazers you mentioned, be part of the original 75, or are they a separate group?
Part of the same. So of the 75, 18, up to 18, will choose, and it'll be an iterative process with the staff life unit. They will sign up to become trailblazers. And some of the features is that they're likely, I mean, this is all subject to the business case being signed off finally by the Treasury, but our thinking is that those trailblazers are likely to receive perhaps some of the funding earlier than all of the 75, perhaps, because if they can hit the ground running, that might be possible to do that. There will be extra demands made of trailblazers in terms of reporting, but also in terms of providing sort of consulting support to other local authorities, perhaps being twinned with them. All of these things have not yet been sort of finalised and sort of nailed down, but that's the sort of areas that we're looking at.
Given that it's in the mental health awareness, Andrew, perhaps you could say a little bit specifically about what you see that element of the programme looking like.
Yeah, so for me, and for Sally, and for many in this room, and no doubt on the call, the infant mental health part of it is so integral to everything. I mean, it's where I started out 25 years ago, getting involved with the Oxford Parent Infant Project that was providing parent-infant psychotherapy for families who were struggling to form a secure bond with their new babies, often due to the parents' mental health issues, perhaps conflict in the relationship, just the traumas that parents have been through themselves, often linked to poverty or their own earliest experiences. And so that's where I came at this from. And of course, fast forward to today, we also know that most local authority areas have some breastfeeding support. They obviously all have health visitors, they all have midwives, they all have early years help, but very, very few of them have specialist parent-infant relationship support. So the 100 million for that, as opposed to 50 million for breastfeeding, 50 million for parenting programs, that is no error, that's no coincidence. The 100 million is because we recognise that we massively need to ramp up the support for parents with their babies. And why is that? It's because of the underdevelopment of the human baby at birth, and the baby's earliest experiences very much driven by the baby's relationship with his or her parents and carers, is integral to the lifelong emotional and physical development of that baby. So what we can't do is to just provide a cup of coffee and a shoulder to cry on. We've got to focus on proper support for parent and infant mental health. And this Infant Mental Health Week is a critical one, because we've seen during lockdown, we've seen incidences of deliberate harm to babies rise. We've seen huge stresses between couples. So we've seen partner violence. We've seen a lot of relationship breakdown. We know that a lot of early years visits took place on Zoom, which is very difficult to assess relationships when you're not in the room with someone. So this is a very important year for infant mental health. And as I say, the priority of the spending review, you know, a third of all of the funding is going to focus on developing good, healthy parent-infant relationships. Very exciting.
Sally-Anne.
Yes, thank you. But just looking at education and childcare T levels, I wonder whether this is something that we could actually really start focusing on as well, because East Sussex College in Hastings does this. It's a very popular course. I think it would give quite a good basis on which we can grow something more health visitors or some specialists in education and childcare.
Yes, so on the one hand, the concept of family hubs goes from conception to the age of 19, as you know, or 25 in the case of disabilities. And so the family hub itself and the services, the join up of services within the family hub will go throughout the whole of the childhood of that infant that we're talking about today. And you're absolutely right. As a result of a key part of the family hub, if you like, model will be that you have services co-located. And whilst for me, I'm focusing on the perinatal services being co-located, it seems to me that through the sort of organic growth of family hubs, what you will find is more and more through the integrated care partnerships and so on, you will see more and more co-location of services. And you'll also see much more of an attempt at continuous professional development taking place in family hubs, both virtually and physically. So over time, I would agree with you that those who perhaps work in the nursery now and maybe aspire to be a mental health support worker or a breastfeeding advisor might actually then go on to say, well, actually, I would like to be working with older children. I'd like to be providing support for children as they go through this journey. So I do think that there's a lot of potential. It's not the specific focus here, which really is looking at the conception to age 2 period, but with a view to providing a route further up the chain for children who, albeit, you know, I would argue until I'm blue in the face that if you get it right in the conception to age 2 period, you will find everything is so much easier. School readiness is better, speech and language is better, self-esteem is better, ability to learn, therefore, is better. So actually you're setting out on a good path, but nevertheless, children do have problems later on. And I do think that, you know, this whole policy area of family hubs is going to help later on too.
That 0 to 2, I know it's the 1001 days, but
Yes.
children, even if they've suffered neglect, so it's not actual physical harm, but neglect, have gaps in their psychological and emotional development, which can impact on their learning. And I don't know about the Thrive programme that you've probably heard about,
Yeah.
some of the schools are having to do. So I think it's absolutely right. It's getting that proper emotional, psychological input into those children to start. And parents sometimes need help in that sort of area.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And because what we're focused on here is at the very beginning, so right from conception. However, of course, things happen and children have severe mental health problems, having had a very fantastic start for life. And so actually the whole thinking through the family hub model of prevention, early intervention, a focus on mental health is very, very strong and very sound. And interestingly, I mean, you'll know, Sally-Anne, about DFE and looking at sort of mental health first aiders in schools. I mean, in a sense, that's looking at the firefighting end rather than looking at the prevention end. But as we get the prevention end right, then I do think that as children go through the school process, we will actually start to think, well, hang on a minute, if we can do it in the early years, we should be able to do it all the way through. So pick up those children who then struggle later on. So yeah, I think you make a really good point.
Sally, back to the question there, which you'll have to read.
Yeah.
The reason I'm not reading the questions is we've got a big screen in this room, and my eyesight isn't that good enough. And Sally's controlling the PC, who can see it at close down. So it's not very good design. Anyway, Sally, go on.
So this questionnaire says, I would like to ask if there is specific training for all who work with babies and young children to help in developing relationships between babies and their families.
Yes, so that is another great question. We have, as I mentioned, there will be a retention of a relatively small amount of the 300 million by the Start for Life unit in order to provide virtual online learning, which again, it's not finally nailed down. All I'm telling you is complete sort of leaks of our thinking, if you like. I hesitate to say the word leak, but it's all sort of the way we are thinking. No hesitation at all. The direction of travel is that we will provide online learning, and that should be very much focused on upskilling and also cross-skilling the early years workforce. By the early years workforce, I mean everyone from a grandparents drop-in group, a dad's support for dads volunteer group, home start volunteers, so the voluntary sector, all the way through family workers who are perhaps relatively low skilled and relatively cheap, but who have the sort of the contacts, the day-to-day contacts with parents, right the way through health visitors, midwives, and to the sort of most sort of senior psychiatric consultants about the importance of parent and infant mental health, trauma-informed care, the importance of looking at adverse childhood experiences in the parents as well as in very young children. So yes, that online and face-to-face learning will be available, and it is part of our plan.
Thank you.
One last one, I think, yeah.
Last one. So this is from Joanne. I wonder how community groups will be able to connect. Currently, I feel there are a lot of great services that work very much on their own.
Yeah, that is integral to this, is that the joined up services, action area number 1, will be the responsibility of the leader, the local leader, as defined in action area number 6. And that local leader could be the Director of Children's Services, it could be the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, it could be the chair of the Integrated Care Partnership once it's established. But the idea is that local leader will be responsible for the co-design and the continuous development of joined up Start for Life services that utilise the strengths of the voluntary sector, the faith sector, the statutory sector, the health sector, the local government sector. So looking right across the board, and I've had lots of meetings with big charities, small voluntary groups, home starts, church groups and so on, all of whom want to get involved and very much will be involved in providing that sort of joined up set of Start for Life services.
Okay, as you were. So we now have Dr. Lisa Marland and is it Maguire, who I'm going to let you do your own introductions, because these have gone out for all of our people webinar anyway. So we've got the presentation and some slides, and then a bit of time for Q&A at the end, and then Sally will come in if any Sally's presentation end as well. Lisa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting us today. We're delighted to be here to talk about our amazing parents and mental health service PABs. I am Lisa Marsland, I'm a consultant clinical psychologist, and I am the Parent Infant Mental Health Lead for Merseycare NHS Trust, and I clinically lead a number of Parent Infant Mental Health services called PABs.
Hi, my name is Maguire, and I'm the Early Help Locality Manager within Septon Council, and my remit is around that perinatal window and that conception to the 1001 days.
And can I just say before we start that when I was chairing Parent Infant Foundation, or PIPs it was before, one of the first PIPs we had was up in Liverpool, Liv PIP, which was fantastic, and always the most enthusiastic of all the PIPs when they came to give presentations on how they were getting on. And then we got lots of inquiries from Sefton and Knowsley next door about we want some of that as well. So it's great to see the influence that's spreading out of that. Absolutely. It's great experts.
Yeah, you're right, we're absolutely passionate about this in Merseyside and Cheshire and Mersey and I'm just so grateful before Sally goes off and does more amazing stuff that she invited us here today to talk about our service, because everything that Andrea talked about in terms of
partnership models, how parent infant mental health services should be located within family hubs. This is what our service is. We are a collaborative partnership with mental health services and local authority, and I would say we are a bit of a trailblazer in this model and parent infant mental health services. So thank you for Sally for inviting us today. Okay, so a little bit about our service. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we are here to talk about our parent infant mental health service in Sefton called BABS, the Building Attachment Bond Service. And like I think what Angie said, you said Tim, Sally, for us, this is where best start of life begins. You know, at the very start, antenatally, when parents become pregnant. And we believe that this specialist parent infant mental health support absolutely has to be offered at this point. We are all about, we think that all families should have access to parent infant mental health support, but for us, the most vulnerable at risk parents and babies in our community, those under social care, those who have high health inequalities, we believe should have this support as early as possible. And like Sally, we believe that relationships are everything. So we're very much about supporting best start of life with our service. Okay, Michelle is going to start with Sefton.
Right, so it's over to me now from the point of view of Sefton as a local authority. So Tim's mentioned Liverpool. We're actually the north leg above Liverpool, all the way along the coastline. And we're 31 out of 189 lowest super output areas in Sefton, 4 within the top 10% deprived in England. That's 17%. 5 of them are in the top 1% of deprived areas nationally, and a further 19 in the top 5% nationally. So we're an unusual borough in the sense that we've got pockets of very, very, very high deprivation and then pockets of high affluence as well. So we don't always feature within some of the selection, which we'll come along to later. So we've got approximately 18% of children in low-income families within the highest density in the south of our borough, which is around the Bootle area of Liverpool, which some of you may have heard of. Within a year across Sefton, we have a population of new births in excess of 2,500. We know nationally that 20% of new parents suffer with mental health issues, so therefore we know we have that cohort of around 500 parents a year who might be new parents who will be suffering in some way, be it postnatal or antenatal. And during the last 5 years as a local authority, and we've been looking at our data, looked after children have increased by 42%, and that's been increasing every quarter in the last 2 years. And then we've looked at our babies removed at birth, and that's doubled in the past 10 years. So therefore, as a local authority, we've been very looking at the gaps that we might have and looking at what services we might not provide and how we can therefore address those needs. Go to the next slide. So going back to 2018, as a local authority, we went through quite a large restructure within locality working. So it was decided that we'd have a north, a central and a south locality. And that physically brought together what were our children's centres and what were our family centres as physical buildings. All the workforces were brought together as well at the time, and that included people from targeted youth and from other services within our local authority. We at that time became 12 family hubs. We call them family wellbeing centres. So what they are in essence family hubs. There's still lots of development work. There's still a way to go, but the progress we've made has been quite phenomenal. COVID has had an impact, but that will come at a later date. And we've also, one of the family hubs has become a new therapeutic family wellbeing centre. So we've been targeting a lot of the therapeutic work with partners and within the local authority within one centre so that we can have expertise within one place, but with a view to cascading and disseminating it out across. The multidisciplinary team of staff on part of integrated family services, we've found that critical to our way of working, and Andrea alluded to that, as in we call it cross-fertilisation. So our workforce that came together within early help, within family hubs, was a workforce at the time of around 80 to 90 staff all came together to work from the family hubs. Within that, staff who've worked with babies, staff who've worked with teens, have done a lot of cross-fertilisation, working with one another, so that everyone's starting to understand the different disciplines and how we can put across for that whole family working. As we all know, and I'm sure at least I missed Will at the beginning because we were still on the train, but the family hubs are there to ensure families with children, young people aged 0 to 19 receive early help to overcome a range of difficulties and build strong relationships. And that word again is key, relationships, because we find our way of working builds on every relationship we have, whether it's parent to child, whether it's a workforce to another workforce, an agency to a partner. All those relationships are key. I can go to the next slide, please, Sal. So we identified that we did have a gap in parent and mental health within Sefton. I've been aware from previous work that I've been involved in that there was some work going on in a neighbouring local authority of Knowsley, and that's where I first came from, Lisa. And I, at the time, met with the lead midwife at the Liverpool Women's Hospital and with Lisa, and we talked about it. And from the minute I first heard about it, which was probably 7 or 8 years ago now, I realised this was something we really, really wanted and needed. To reinforce that then, you'll see at the side of the slide, there's the copy of the Rare Jewels document. And when I read that, that made me even more passionate that this was something we needed in Sefton. I think at the time I read that, there was 29 parent infant mental health services across the local authority, which was only a couple of years ago, maybe. I think, are we 41 or 42 now? Yeah. So as our services begun, we're sort of adding to the number. Much as we've made a case in the past for the need, COVID did give us that leverage because it did exacerbate the need even further. We looked at the document Lockdown Babies, we talked about that voice of the child, the voice of the baby, that critical stage in those 1001 days where a child cannot verbalise unless you really understand the way they communicate. You wouldn't know their cues necessarily. They might have been conceived in lockdown, born in lockdown, and then not have those social aspects of development that they would have normally had in normal times. We never gave up. We kept looking for funding here, there and everywhere. We submitted large bids to What Works Children's Social Care. We got to the final hurdle, didn't quite get there. We made pleas in a number of arenas. However, we finally got some funding which was aimed at supporting vulnerable groups that were at higher risk as a result of COVID lockdown. And we put forward a really strong case around our lockdown babies and our parents who had had that prenatal and postnatal stage, maybe in need of some additional support. So Lisa and I got together. We'd already been working on bids in the past. We made a really strong case. We got our funding and we started the ball rolling probably in September, October of last year, and we launched in January of this year. So it will run till December of this year because we're a 12-month pilot at the moment. We are looking at our outcomes, which Lisa will be adding to in a minute. So what we did think was key was that co-location of the BABS service within our family hubs. So like I said at the beginning, we've got 12 family hubs. They are across 3 different localities. We decided that in each locality, we would have one centre where BABS service would have space, and one that has become the sort of the base really. We felt that would have that cross-fertilisation with our staff. It would mean they were in the community from the grassroots up, so they were seen. Families could access within the family hubs if they were familiar with them. And then in the same way that our model is, also as Andrea pointed out before, there's the physical element of having a building as a family hub. There's your satellite sites, there's your partners, then there's your virtual element, but key to us as early help and family hubs is outreach. So actually physically going out into homes and then engaging families back in. I think that might be done. That's got to you, Lisa. Yeah, you can do this. Yeah, thank you. So So yeah, so I mentioned already that we were a 12-month parent infant mental health service as a pilot. It was funded via the local authority. We've mentioned that it was from COVID recovery money, so to speak. It's located in the family hubs. Lisa has mentioned, you used the word trailblazing, and I know that that's another word that's being used now for the other 18 that will become trailblazers, but in the partnership model we have, and the developments that are coming even within the first 6 months to 9 months of development, it is trailblazing in some of the partnerships and different outcomes, which we'll touch on at the end with the successes. We're offering the model across early help, children's social care, midwifery, health. I think that partnership is key. We started off with a steering group that we'd use to write bids, and that group is a really strong group. We've got great representation from the third sector. We've got representation from both our midwifery sites in Liverpool and in Lancashire. And the representation we get there is, and the attendance has been great, and I would say that's been critical to getting it off the ground. And we have subgroups that form, different protocol groups from that. So that's all kind of the legwork going on behind. So then, you do the last one. I'll take you to your next slide, then into your specialist multidisciplinary team.
And I think talking about that steering group, which is really key. You know, we've had our clinicians on board with that. We've had ICS leads. We've had, you know, all the different system leads. And I think for me, going back to relationships, everything. But I think the parents and mental health services, as Sal said, for the right people to have responsibility and accountability, it needs the leads of all those systems, public health, local authority, health, CCG, to all kind of be within that model and put the money in that pot, should we say. So I think we got it right. The commissioner model and the stakeholders group was right from the start, which we're delighted about, and they're really supportive of the service moving forward. So in terms of the service, it is an MDT service supporting the most vulnerable at-risk parents and babies, secure bonds and relationships in those 1,000 more critical days. I believe that all families should have access to parent infant mental health services. As a mum of 4 children myself, you know, I've struggled at times on my journey, so I think it should be absolutely offered to everybody who needs that specialist support at the right time. But for me, the injustice is those families with high health inequalities, under social care, and as Yara said, those babies that are removed, sometimes for very right reasons, but also very predatory as well, or because the local authority needs to put in safeguarding because it isn't the right support services for those families. And I think it's those vulnerable at risk parents and babies who are at risk of removal, separation, need our service the most. So instead, I would say our service is for anyone struggling with mental health bonds and attachment, but I'd say predominantly we are focused around supporting those vulnerable at risk parents and babies that sit under our local authorities. Okay, so a little bit about, so to kind of, I think this world of work is very specialist, very targeted, very high risk. And it is for those families that, you know, people may say horrible words, difficult to engage. Obviously, families are difficult to engage with the services that struggle to engage. And I think nothing kind of shares this world better than family stories. So this is just a short video of 2 families who've spoken about their journey along BABS and about their experience. So we just wanted to share this short video, and it also reflects the impact of lockdown as well. Thanks, Sam.
It's coming, don't worry.
So you're doing that.
So far, so good. Welcome to ASA.
No. Being set on, environment friendly.
Yeah. It was the wrong video.
You should jump forward again.
Right.
This is about.
My problem has just changed my life. It's just changed my life to be fit. See? This is just the miracle to me. I'm calling for lights after the door. It's my best mate. He's just everything, really, everything.
But life could have been very different for Alfie and Robin.
Robin got removed at the start, which Vicken was still on the forefront, and it was just my mental health wasn't very good, and say social services got involved. It was horrible. I was in an abusive relationship, and when I got pregnant, we fled our home, and I was in a really bad place. Oh, me there too. I just couldn't bond with the pregnancy, and I was scared that he'd look like his dad, and big like his dad. Alfie thoughts.
Both Danny and Marion were helped by the NHS Mental Health Service BABS, which through one-to-one psychotherapy helps parents work through issues affecting their bond with their baby.
If you've had adverse childhood experiences, which is past trauma, abuse, not very good parenting, all these issues come and kind of hit you in the face really when you have a baby. It's about kind of banishing ghosts really, because the most important thing is separating out.
I'm worried that people watching can't actually hear it, that's why no sound. Right. I'm just going to unshare it and try again. Sorry.
It was all going so well in the room.
Sorry to everybody at home. Oh, yeah. Try that again. And apologies to those in the room. Again now.
Where you going? Did I get you? Having Robin has just changed my life. She saved my life, to be fair.
Can't hear it.
She's just a miracle to me. I call him the light after the dark. He's my best mate.
He's just everything, really, everything.
Right.
We'll try again. Could somebody put in the chat that it's okay, if it is okay, please, so we know it's working.
Okay, so I think it's because it's coming up on a different screen. So we need to go to that one. Just found right.
The sound button before you
Yeah.
select.
Yeah, I think it's because it jumped to YouTube. Because everybody else is still watching the slide. Please put in the chat if this works or not.
Where you going? Did I get you?
Yeah.
Having Robin has just changed my life. She saved my life, to be fair. She's just a miracle to me. I call him the light after the dark. He's my best mate. He's just everything, really, everything.
But life could have been very different for Alfie and Robin.
Robin got removed at the start. My drinking was still on the forefront, and it was just my mental health wasn't very good, and say social services got involved. It was horrible. I was in an abusive relationship, and when I got pregnant, we fled our home, and I was in a really bad place. Oh, me there too. I just couldn't bond with the pregnancy, and I was scared that he'd look like his dad, and big like his dad. Alfie Pops.
Both Danny and Marion were helped by the NHS Mental Health Service BABS, which through one-to-one psychotherapy helps parents work through issues affecting their bond with their baby.
If you've had adverse childhood experiences, which is, past trauma, abuse, not very good parenting, all these issues come and kind of hit you in the face really when you have a baby. It's about kind of banishing ghosts really, because the most important thing is separating out those things so you can have that bond and the attachment with your baby.
It was good to be able to speak to people who don't judge you, because obviously when things have happened to you, forms of abuse, you feel ashamed. Just helped sort of change your thought pattern, and then when I had him, the bond was there straight away. If I didn't have the support from Babs and everything they'd done for me, and they building me up and getting me strong, I don't feel like I ever would have got Robin back. everything I owe to them, and myself basically. You've got to do it for yourself as well, that's the thing. You've got to believe in yourself.
But COVID-19 and restrictions on daily life is making life harder for parents following in Danny and Marion's footsteps.
That vulnerability has been increased massively for parents and infants. They can't access the children's centres, they can't get support and be with the people who they love and who support them.
I worry and think about the women who are in domestic violence relationships, who are now stuck in the house with that partner and with the children with no escape.
These mums' stories show how crucial it is to give parents help as early as possible and what a difference that can make.
Very sadly, lots of babies have been removed from parents' care who maybe, with the right specialist parents infant mental health support, the outcomes could have been totally different.
Life now, it's brilliant, I love it. We're all really happy, we've moved on.
I'm pregnant with twins, as you can see, but I don't have any social services involved in my life or anything anymore. The love and the laughter and the fun in my life, it was just in the bottom of a bottle, it wasn't there. It's here now. I'm getting emotional. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Sorry, our editing video wasn't very good, not very tech managed, and put that on there, but I come on to give a big speech for the BBC, and I didn't really want to have that in, so sorry about the editing. That really is just a very small snapshot of just some of the families that we work with, but I guess a good reflection of the vulnerable families that we support. Sefton, unfortunately, wasn't one of the boroughs chosen for Best Start for Life funding, which we are very, very sad about, because we do think it would have been a fabulous trailblazer Tim for just getting in there. But we do have an amazing Start Well programme in Sefton, so we have very passionate leads in local authority and in health, CCG, public health, who are very passionate about it, committing to Start Well. And the BABS Parents Infant Mental Health Service fits within some of their 4 areas of delivery and priorities. So we clearly fit within early intervention and prevention, obviously as a service, which works alternately for vulnerable parents and infants. It fits within emotional wellbeing and mental health as a mental health service, but it also massively fits with looked after children, support and looked after children, because many of our parents have been looked after children themselves, and lots of our babies are looked after babies, often with joint care of local authority and with parents, or babies on child protection plans, child in need under early help, on pre-proceedings, but and lots of babies are placed in parents' infant placements and support. So our service absolutely fits with supporting those looked after children in offering a more system-wide preventative approach of this sufficiency strategy, and looking at how we can best, as a partnership, support looked after children. And again, I would argue that we also fit within transforming care, so supporting parents and babies who may have issues around SEND. Lots of our parents have neurodiversity, learning difficulties. So I'd say that it is about supporting vulnerable at risk parents and babies in these key areas as early as possible. I won't talk too much, but just a little bit more reflection around early intervention. I would say our Start Well strategy in Sefton fits very much with the Best Start for Life, very similar priorities really. But we work at the heart of intervention and prevention. We work at the heart of intervention and prevention in preventing family breakdown, preventing insecure attachment difficulties, preventing later child mental health, preventing separation and removal, preventing our babies from having the same ACEs as their childhood experience as what their parents had, and preventing developmental delay. So we've done some fabulous research in Merseyside around looking at how parents who have high numbers of ACEs which the research is quite damning about. So if you've got high numbers of ACEs, you're going to die 20 years earlier, basically. But we've shown through BABS in Nosley, the service that's been running for over 8 years now, that actually if we offer this specialist parenting for mental health support at the right period, that we can break those cycles of ACEs. So our babies, we follow them up at age 2 to 2.5. And what we showed through research is those babies that families, parents were damned, they were going to end up with all these ACEs, actually go on to develop really good milestones. So we look at data from the Health Visitor Stages and Stages questionnaires, and what we showed was those parents with 5 or more ACEs, which is really high, with this support, 2.5 years later, those babies, 73%, around 73% of the babies who were under our service, those families that were really struggling, went on to have average good developmental milestones, which I think is massive. Thinking about the impact for longer term mental health and development as children, like Sal said, those neurons, those connections, and that early start is so important. So, and just along with early intervention and prevention, so we are really, really passionate about supporting our most vulnerable at-risk parents and babies as early as possible, and really creating change in the system. You know, Sally's mentioned, Gemma's mentioned, Andrea, that far too many babies are going into the care system. So many babies and parents are at breakdown, and we're not getting in there early enough. So we developed a partnership with Children's Social Care in Sector. We're just at the start of developing a collaborative multi-agency model of pre-birth assessments. So lots of our vulnerable parents and babies where there's high safeguarding risks are assessed by local authority Children's Social Care, looking at, you know, pre-birth, before baby comes, you know, can this parent safely, what's the relationship like, all that stuff. And what the local authority feels strongly about, and we do, is that those assessments are done far too late. Currently they're done around 30 weeks of pregnancy, and by the time local authorities get to assess parents and babies and families engage, and you know, sometimes those assessments aren't done until parents have the baby, and then the only safe way to assess or support that family is either removing the baby or placing the parent infant into an assessment unit, which is very, very expensive. So as we know, prevention is key in everything. So we in BABS are really passionate about developing a partnership model of pre-birth assessments to help our children's social care in doing these partnership, quite specialist, quite, you know, complex assessments really, very early on, much earlier in pregnancy. So we're proposing to do this when parents are 20 weeks pregnant, start it then, so 10 weeks earlier, and having like a multi-agency panel where we get all the multi-agency around the table, look at with different multi-agencies doing this assessment, so it all just doesn't sit under social care. But social care lead these assessments, pull it all together, and that we can put in good interventions as early as possible. So we're starting off with a pilot for this in Sefton, and we're going to start with looking at 5 families, evaluating it. But again, we think it could be a really good trailblazing model for the UK. Okay, and emotional wellbeing and mental health obviously speaks for itself. BABS is a specialist parenting mental health service that engages vulnerable parents and babies to support them with mental health bonds and attachments. And what we feel in BABS is enough, like Sally says, isn't discussed about how difficult this period is for parents. You know, you'll never ever be more vulnerable with your mental health than after having a baby. And the Red Book and the maternity file just doesn't explain how all these, your own past trauma, your own parenting comes back and hits you in the face when you have a baby. So BABS is all about helping those vulnerable parents to separate out their own mental health, their own issues from the relationship with the baby, like in my and Diana's case. And just a few stats for those people who like a few stats and numbers. Just in the Sefton BABS Building Attachment Bond Service, 73% of our families are open to children's social care. So that really reflects the complexity and the vulnerability of the families that we work with and support. Michelle talked about Sefton as a vulnerable, it's very, very vulnerable. So, thank you. And obviously, I won't go on too much about ACEs. A lot of people know about the research in ACEs, and Tim was nodding away. But what we know is that the research in ACEs is very damning. If you've got a high number of ACEs and you come into being the parent, you carry those ACEs through to your children if we don't get the right specialist support to break those cycles. On average, our parents in Sefton have an average of 5 ACEs, which is very high. And again, we know that by offering specialist parenting for mental health support, we can prevent those ACEs from being carried forward for those babies with this support. And lastly, our lovely infograph. So just to kind of highlight the levels of different intervention and support that we offer in BABS. So we offer 3 levels of intervention. We offer the universal level of training, consultation, psychoeducation, supervision. And then we offer a targeted level of interventions, which is the video interactive guidance program, ACEs, parenting program, and a Getting to Know Your Baby antenatal and postnatal group program. So that's targeting our kind of families who need that targeted level. And then the specialist parenting for psychotherapeutic support we offer, which is often for those more high risk, very vulnerable families, is offered by our clinical psychologists, and that's very much on focusing on those families who've had trauma, very insecure attachment, and support those parents who are separated from babies, so it doesn't pose a massive risk to the relationship. And the little diagram at the bottom is a jigsaw which highlights the partnership work we do in BABS. Our partnership model, I think, is amazing, and I think the success and the outcomes that we're getting already is because of that partnership. So we are partnership, we work tightly with early help, very in partnership tightly with children's social care. 80% of our referrals come from specialist midwives, and we've got a pathway that we're developing with CAMS for our teenage parents, which we've got about 12 very young teenagers that are being referred to Sefton that we're passionate about joining up with CAMS and supporting. Okay, Michelle can talk about some of the challenges.
Some of the challenges then, so we did sort of mention right at the beginning around funding, so we do have the BABS pilot until December, and we are at a stage now where we're having started our first meeting about either exit planning or continuation funding, but it's about sort of being mindful of thinking ahead around that. As Lisa has mentioned a number of times, we weren't selected for Best Start for Life funding, which we're still getting over, but you know. And then recruitment to the pilot's been difficult. It's taken a lot of time because recruiting some of the professional levels that we needed, particularly in the therapeutic services, there were people who didn't want to leave permanent posts to come for a 12-month contract. There were people who seemed like they might and then couldn't at the last minute. So that has been a tricky one, but we've got our full complement and a tiny bit more as well now. The huge need and demand, which I know Lisa will want to add to, but in the first 6 months we've had 70 referrals. We have been quite, I wouldn't say strict on criteria, but we have done our own gatekeeping, where, you know, if we were to advertise it everywhere, we would have had way more than 70 referrals. So we've had to start so we don't not meet expectation. And about 52 of those families translated into being worked with, is that right, Lisa? Yeah. So a high number of vulnerable families, as we've already pointed out, 73% were children's social care, and of the families we've got involved, of the 52, those families, the parents have got 5+ ACEs. We are evidencing outcomes in the pilot. That is another challenge in itself because it's such a short window. But we are at a stage now where we're getting to see some of the outcomes and can provide that case study evidence as well. So you've got your anecdotal as well as your qualitative data. Services and families will be at risk without the funding, so we are very much putting ourselves forward at any meeting possible where we're discussing it and getting people around the table. And the interest is very keen, it's very supportive. And Lisa is about to attend, and I think I may be attending with you, that we're going to attend our integrated care system board meeting to discuss this, and we attended Startwell yesterday. So it's about explaining and making sort of your whole workforce understand the benefits and the cost benefits that are involved with this. There are challenges.
Thank you. And successes and rewards, I would say, far outweigh the challenges. I would say, as a parenting mental health service that supports very vulnerable risk families, we are absolutely delivering life-changing outcomes and interventions for the most vulnerable group at the right time. And for me, I think often we don't see the outcomes for long way down the line. Sally is the best advocate for this out of anyone I know. But for me, investing in these babies today is investing in generations to come. And I just feel so lucky and blessed to be leading this service. It is a true partnership. People talk about partnership working, and I don't think people absolutely do it in essence. We are a true partnership service that works in partnership, local authority, mental health, and we are an integral part of those family hubs. Recognised nationally as a model of best practice in supporting vulnerable, hard-to-reach families. We won national awards. And I would say, especially with that kind of partnership work with early health and children's social care, the pre-birth assessments, changing practice, changing things that sometimes don't help families in the right way. We're driving change, intervention, prevention at the best place. And we've been nominated for parliamentary awards by Peter Dowd. And I just think that everyone involved in the BAB service is 100% committed and dedicated to supporting this agenda. And I think the fact that we're co-located, we've got all of our kind of early health workers and staff trained in parenting for mental health, and we are committed to, as Andrea said, evaluating and showing the difference that this work makes. And we've got Edge Hill and Liverpool University who are interested in supporting this moving forward. And lastly, last but not least, is just next steps. So feedback, bit of feedback. This is just a little bit of feedback about what people have said about the service, professionals and patients. So every family that works at BABS has been praising them. That's from one of our IROs in children's social care. This patient talks really highly about her work in BABS, and we can see the difference it's making. That's from a social worker recently. And BABS has been helping a lot. It's been brilliant, and I really trust and that's for the patient. And last steps, next steps. So I think, as Magella said, we are like a dog with a bone. We're not going to be giving up on funding for Sefton. We are a little bit worried about funding ending in December, but we will be providing a detailed evaluation to the Startwell board and the Integrated Commission board. We'll be sharing an evaluation and a business case and really showcasing cost savings and the return on human investment. I'm going to pick Sally's brains on that because that's we're talking about this so eloquently. And we are going to be asking, can we be placed on the waiting list for Best Start for Life? And Andrea shared that there is a waiting list, and some local authorities may not take up this offer. But so we are going to push it. Is there any way can we be on the waiting list for this? Because we do think we are a really good trailblazing model that can showcase this work, and we will just be continuing to build good bonds and great cycles for our families and our services moving forward. Thank you.
Gosh, we've got a few minutes left. Are there any? There's a couple of Q&As. Sorry, to you.
Yeah. Is there any research attached to the pilot?
Not to this pilot, but the Nosy service, which is the sister service of Sefton, has done lots of research previously that we're looking at the reason of, the research into ACEs and long-term outcomes for the children. Our evaluation of the Sefton service, in particular that pre-birth model, and supporting the majority of our families being very vulnerable at risk. I think we're going to really be focusing our evaluation on that area.
And Joanne says, with such a focus on body attachment, do you have local baby wearing consultants or sleep libraries?
Sleep library.
Where you hire a sling to hold your baby in.
But this is what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Right.
They're very expensive and you only need it for a short period.
What was the first thing you said before slings?
It's a very baby wearing consultants and sling libraries. So it's all about baby wearing.
To my knowledge, not, but I will go back and ask my colleagues.
There you go. And Joanne, if you've got good ideas to send Sefton on what they should be doing on that, send them over.
Can I come back to one of your earlier Sorry, Sally, go on.
No, up to you.
Well, I was just coming back to your earlier comment about that's a high number of increasing kids coming into care, particularly high on babies coming into care, because most of the care figures being driven by older kids coming into care. What do you put that down to? Is that partly a symptom of the pandemic, where because new mums in particular haven't had interaction with other new mums, extended family support, new babies haven't been able to meet other new babies, so all those sort of pressures.
And I think it was over a 10-year period, so
It's not just recently. Okay.
it's just sort of that over a 10-year.
But has it gone like that or like that recently, or is it just generally?
I personally think it's because we haven't had services like ours.
Yeah.
For me, safeguarding is supporting. People think of safeguarding, it sits with local authority, and absolutely they are the system that has to do that really impossible job of safeguarding. But safeguarding is multi-agency,
Yeah.
and for me, safeguarding is offering the best possible support, or specialist support, as early as possible.
Yeah.
And I think the absence of services like ours is, and other services is created that. And for me, it's about supporting our local authorities to say, absolutely, you know what, let's support this risk. Let's not be very risk averse, but our local authorities are being slammed for not protecting children or not safeguarding children. But it's about us saying, you know what, let's us support you in safeguarding these families and saying, let's give this parent and baby a chance, and we can be a service that can offer this very specialist support that can reduce risk.
And it's interesting, the care review, and one of the sort of primary responses is about safeguarding specialists, local authorities, of course, they need to work very closely with you. Final question, you tell me.
Thank you, Tim. I used to be a family court magistrate, so would be one of those people removing children from care of their parents, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this job. My biggest issue was that we'd see the same parents come back a year, 18 months later, and we do the same thing. And the frustrating thing was that we could do nothing for those parents because it was clear they needed a lot of therapeutic input in order to get them to a place where they could look after their own children. So how does your model work with that? And is there anything we should be doing as legislators to ensure that parents get the same support, get more support to be able to look after their own children when they've been through the family courts?
And that's why the FDAP course was so effective and important, that wraparound service. Yeah.
We are absolutely the service that supports those families. Absolutely. Lots of our parents have had previous children removed, and that transgenerational cycle of ACEs, of trauma, of domestic violence, and you know, those parents have never ever had the right specialist therapeutic support to separate out those risks and issues and patterns from the relationship with their children. And I absolutely believe 98% of the parents that I work with give birth, go into parenting wanting to be a very different parent from their own, wanting to be an amazing parent. The issue is they're not given the right specialist support to be able to prioritise the relationship with the children, prioritise themselves, you know, really separate those risk factors. And I feel that we, along with social care, along with early help, along with those multi-agencies, are key in saying you and your baby are the most important thing in this world. You as a parent, because those parents go on to keep on having children because it fills a void within them. They do it to try and fulfill an insecure attachment in them. So what they need is an attachment-based service that works on those insecure attachments and helps them build a really healthy, good attachment with the baby, which in a way would fill that void. But going back to your point about what support's available afterwards, we do support parents who have the children removed, and we do support them post, and we will always try and support them to get the best support from adult mental health services. So I lead parents in mental health and emergency care, which is the leading trust in adult mental health services. And it's about making sure that adult mental health services have a priority, a fast track for those parents who are at the most risk. Because if you don't support their mental health, they're going to continue to keep on having babies, and those babies then will become parents tomorrow, and the cycle just goes on. But the BABS model is all about supporting your parents who you haven't caught.
I think it's also worth mentioning, you touched on this before, is the earliest you can get into that antenatal stage. As soon as you know someone is pregnant and you know there's some risk, if you can have that therapeutic intervention then, as opposed to finding out at birth or just after birth, possibly when a baby's been removed, and then you're repairing that before you can do, you know what I mean? You've given yourself a much bigger piece of work to do if you've let it go. That's the earliest stage in the pregnancy. That's when you make the biggest difference.
And it'd be great to take a read at the end, Sally, and I'll forward you a video we did of other parents who very much those families I was talking about. And it really reflects the kind of the return on investment, the changes in the break of those cycles, because I think it is all about those families in the video I'm going to send you have had really good therapeutic support very early on in pregnancy. And as Michelle was saying, what that does when you give them very high risk parents who've got a lot of trauma, 3 kids removed previously, when they have really intensive psychotherapy when they're pregnant, if they give birth to this baby, automatically have a greater capacity to separate out those risks and their own trauma. And it's almost like, I'm not saying we get rid of all those past issues and that trauma and risk, but I'd say the antenatal therapy is really, really important. And the earlier we get them, better.
I think in terms of your question, just following on from that, what can be done, I think the care review and have some really helpful messages that could provide space for more of this sort of work. But it's obviously a huge review covering all aspects of detection of risk through to kind of children who are in the care system, what's happening to them. So I think there's something about keeping the focus on this family help and the early bit and the antenatal period. So because it's going to be such a big reform programme if government starts to act on everything in the care review. So being an advocate for that, but also for joining up. At the moment, we've got fabulous stuff that Andrew was talking about in Start for Life and hopeful green shoots in the care review in different departments with different agendas and kind of trying to get that to all add up to more than the sum of its parts of families. It's going to be really important. The care review and Star Hobson's, the review into Star Hobson's murder, both had messages about the importance of universal and targeted services and the kind of greater system, but there's a risk that some of that isn't going to be picked up in the scope of what the FE does result. So somebody who can challenge all of the bits of government to come together over this to make sure that the right work is starting antenatally would be really important.
We might want to come back to the care review in the future meeting and have an impact on the early age because there's a couple of us on safeguarding and that early intervention. But we've run over time. Thank you very much to both of you. Really interesting. And all those slides will be available on the website. And there's some really nice comments to see coming in on the chat as well about that solution. So thank you very much. And I think we get your funding, you can carry on and expand the work because it's also a model of good practice that we do in the country. Thank you to all our other speakers. Thank you for your patience, everybody online. And I hope you got the video for the third time, but that we will feature on the website available as well. So thank you very much, everybody. We will meet again in the early autumn. We'll put a date round, and there's a number of speakers I know we want to get, so that we're going to put a packed meeting. So we'll keep you posted. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.